And if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked. So listen up, cause this hair of the dog, what's real, what ain't, is this the fog or smog? Cause there's a difference when you breathe it in. So don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know. So I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Hair of the dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Speeding the fact.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Monday morning. You have made it this far. You are now in August. We are halfway done with the year. You can do this. I get that it's Monday morning and maybe you're recovering from a vigorous weekend. Hopefully you are. Everybody's happy and safe. But this morning we need to have a very serious adult conversation. We'll try to make it light and fun and just skim the surface. But today we want to talk about economics, and it's all about the money this morning. So we have a couple different stories lined up for you as a recap, and we'll just focus on this very narrow area so that we can continue the discussion. We had a really great interview with Morris Pearl from the Patriotic Millionaires, where we started talking about how taxation controls behavior. And here we had Morris, who is from a very affluent class. All of these people in this group are millionaires, multimillionaires, and they're asking for their own taxes to be raised. So go and check that out. It's on our website and YouTube, and a couple different places, but great conversation. But before we get into all of that, we need to say good morning to our lovely and talented co-host, Andy Kennedy. Good morning.
Good morning, Gary. And how are you this fine morning?
You're so serious and so proper. What's going on?
Oh, I don't know. Have you noticed that anything that happens in 2000 or 2020 has to have an ominous side to it, right? Like we used to get, rainy days where it would just kind of rain and people would be inside, looking outside thinking, oh, when is it going to be sunny? There weren't tornadoes in the forecast or winds coming up, blowing, and these green clouds flying over that say, yeah, we're a storm, but it's 2020, so.
we were recounting all of the stuff yesterday, my girlfriend and I, while we were trying to have a socially distanced patio lunch, which consisted of a lot of alcohol and weed. We were going through the list, and I had already forgotten about the sub-Saharan dust storm that rolled through, and all of these things that had come through in the year, and it just feels like a day feels like a week, and a month feels like forever. So just recounting everything is a chore in and of itself, but we can do this.
It's almost like Trump chooses, these extinction level events that are happening to distract. It's like this whole MO for the last 5 years. Well, if this is going to get me in trouble, let's change the narrative so that, it's squirrel. And so
right.
Every month it seems that we get something that makes us forget about the murder bees, the pandemic, although that one just seems to keep, that's the one that has the show every hour at the club, right? Don't forget to tip your waitress. And so it's surreal because we were joking about it in the last show where we were talking about, okay, who had this in the pool? And it just seems like, okay, here's another one. In any other year, any one of these things that had happened would have been the news of the year. But they're all happening this year. And so it's like, okay, well, yeah, there's something else. I guess, we'll just roll with it. Just throw it on the shoulders. We'll just keep walking.
Well, yeah, to your point, in any other year, just the revelation that the U.S. is finally admitting to making contact with intelligent life not on this world, that would have been the headline. And that would have been the news cycle for at least more than a day. That's all we've had. So that's kind of where we're at. And so everybody just hang on. One
Yeah,
of
but I think that lost a lot of steam because from what I understand, the aliens didn't know how to use Zoom.
right. So they couldn't really, socially
They couldn't
distance.
set up interviews and
Right.
so what? Okay, well, something else will come along.
Right, and Take Me to Your Leader probably fell flat in this year. So yeah. But one meme that I saw, because now most people survive on memes alone. I thought this did really well. They took a clear sticker and they put it on their window and it said directed by Quentin Tarantino. And so when you look out your window, that's what you see. And he's like, that's helped me make sense of what's going on in the world. So I'm like, yeah, there you
Great
go.
idea.
Yep, exactly. So, hey, good morning to William, Uncle Barry from Fiji, who's joining us this morning. For everyone else who's tuning in, we do not have a guest, so our guest is you. And that means if you have questions, comments, complaints, critiques, or a topic you want to talk about, just drop it in the chat. We will see it. We will probably respond. If you get snarky, probably going to get snarky right back. So it'll be a lot of fun. But let's go ahead and get started with some of our discussion this morning. So it is August, and in the United States, and in most places, August is a time where parents start their back to school shopping, and we start getting ready for schools that would open in about a week or two. And they're usually on a graduated scale, with the youngest kids going first and then ending with our high school and college classes opening. This year, we are having a bit of a difficulty because of the global pandemic. So you have school administrators with really no guidance whatsoever. They're really trying to feel their way about how can we do this safely, and we have all of this pressure from parents who no longer have unemployment benefits. The $600 additional benefit has gone away. So now you have parents like, look, in order to survive, I've got to go back to work. What do I do with my kid? And we have laws here, depending on which state you live in, you cannot leave a child at home below a certain age. So in some areas it's 10, some it's 12, some it's as high as 14. So you put yourself in a catch-22. And for those of us who were trying to push against the narrative that we saw from the militia in Michigan, open the states back up, I don't want your welfare. Well, no, this had nothing to do with welfare. This had to do with investing in our public for safety reasons. We were using our public money to make sure that the public welfare was sound. Well, now that you have fought successfully to get rid of that, you have left yourselves in the position that you're in. So I'm seeing a whole lot of people criticizing teachers, that it's teachers' fault. And the point that I made, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong here, but in the United States, we have teachers where, because of No Child Left Behind and some other pieces, we have required teachers to go back for higher credentials at their own expense and their own time. We still don't pay them well. Like, let's not confuse an administrator with a teacher salary. And then on top of that, we have asked them to shield our children with their own bodies should a shooter come into the school, which was happening on a month to twice a month basis in the United States. Now, all of that aside, now we've asked teachers, oh, by the way, you might want to fill out a will for your next school year. And in between the 3 to 5 minute passing period, we now expect you to disinfect the entire classroom, including the air ducts, and be ready to teach your students. All of that sounds reasonable, right, Andy?
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah. Oh, damn these teachers, right? So,
well, that goes all with the narrative of, let's blame each other instead of the neoliberal regime that makes all of this possible, that we can, devalue human beings. It's all part of that process, right? We have to, even we're talking Even the universities and colleges right now would say that, well, why are they saying that we need to send them back to school? Why don't we just do this virtually? Well, that's problematic in a lot of ways because you don't have the infrastructure in place for everyone to have the proper bandwidth to do, virtual schooling.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing we do is we make universities and colleges private institutions that have to fund themselves, right? Another unfettered capitalist issue with education, where, well, we can only pay the salaries of the people that run those institutions if we have people in the dormitories at school going to classes, paying for their meal plans and their books and their tuition and their housing, right? The only way we do that is having them here present. So that's another reason why virtual colleges and universities don't work, is because those institutions lose so much money because they're not properly funded by the federal government, like they should be, like teachers should be.
Right, and we saw those headlines.
Yeah,
We saw those headlines over the week with the students saying, "Hey, if I'm going to go to school virtually, shouldn't you give me a break of my tuition?" And these were the college students. And while they have a point, the university's like, "Well, we can't possibly do that because how do we pay our teachers? And we still have to pay for electricity and water and all of these things. While their utility costs may go down, their rents and other things don't." So it puts students now at a disadvantage, like you said, and this is college. Now, what is it doing in elementary and junior high and high school? So let's take a look at that real quick. So first, what happened was this summer is traditionally, I don't know how it is in Canada, but in the United States, parents who still have to work would typically send their kid to a summer camp, either a sleepaway or a day camp. And some of that didn't happen early on in the spring leading into summer because of COVID. But as things started to reopen and we started to push for reopening of the states, parents started to do that. And one of the states that did it was Georgia. So here's what happened in Georgia. And this is a nice write-up from WebMD. This is, not fake news. This is WebMD. They're talking about this Georgia summer camp where 600 campers and counselors and attended it, and 344 were tested for COVID. 76 tested positive. So they didn't even test all 600. They only tested about half, and of those, 67% came back positive by mid-July. So this was a sleepaway camp, and they are thinking that it came in from one student, one of the kids, because all the camp counselors and everybody running this had already been tested. Now, in the United States, we have this problem of logistics because if I were to get a test today, I'm not going to find out until like Thursday, Friday what that test was. Now, what did I do between the time I tested and the time I get my results back? I may have infected other people during that time if it comes back positive, or I may still be at risk and contracted it in the next few days, and I'll get a negative test by Thursday or Friday, so I think I'm in the clear. And that's what's happening in the United States. So in this particular example, one kid came in, affected other people, they all affected other people, and we still only tested half, just half, and found the majority of them tested positive. Right? So we need to consider now, of these 344 who tested positive, how many more did they affect? Because we have the example from South Korea where the one guy went out for a night of clubbing and affected 270 people in one night. So now we have these kids going back to their homes, going back to their families, their friends, all of these things. It has an effect.
Of course it does. I mean, I always like to start with a little bit of baseball talk. I know it drives you insane, but that's what I do. you know, we talked about the Florida Marlins. And
Only
how
because it's
been
not my
shut
sport.
down.
That's why. Only because, but yeah.
The problem is that, and now we're looking at, they understand why that happened in Florida with the Marlins, why the team had 12 players and coaches break up with COVID, and it turns out that a number of the players, while they were playing in Atlanta, snuck out of quarantine, went to the bars in Atlanta, in a place where, you know, they've had a 200% increase in the number of people in hospitals with COVID since the beginning of the month of July. So basically, in a month, they've, you know, tripled the number of people in hospitals with COVID. And of course, it's a Republican, a red state that believes that people need to die for the economy, right? And of course, these baseball players, for the most part, are in their 20s, early 20s, so they don't know any better because they're young and indestructible and, you know, potential millionaires. So they can do what they want. And they, well, we got to go to the bars. And now we're talking about the end of the baseball season, you know, before it's barely gotten off of the ground because of human beings being stupid, right? And so the whole thing in the United States is that we've got this narrative where delay. No, it's not going to happen. It's going to go away. Okay, now that we've done it too late, now we're in trouble. Okay, now we're going to lock people out. The economy's bad, so we're going to, you know, tell people that it's done, get them to go back to work. But we're on that path now. We can't go back because if we do, then it'll make us look like idiots. And we don't want to look like idiots. So people are just going to have to die for our choices.
And that's exactly right. The whole argument of pride, which we'll get to because of the Trump administration. But real quick, I want to say good morning to Jerry and Rebecca. They both chimed in this morning. So Jerry retells a story, and I'll get to that one in a second. But Jerry actually says here, teachers are the unsung heroes, underpaid and underappreciated, and victims of administration, parents, and sometimes even the students, and with no respect from anyone. And so, Jerry, to your point, it's not just teachers. When we're talking about retail workers and like the barista at your favorite coffee place, and somebody walks in with no mask and they get corrected, please put on a mask. And the person responds, well, there's nobody here. Like the person working at that shop is not actually a person, right? So this is same mentality across all of it, that we are not treating people like people, that they are there just to serve us. It is that egocentric kind of thinking, Andy, to your point, that that is putting us behind, because it's so much better for us not to admit that we're wrong on policy and allow your kid, your family member, to be collateral damage from that.
It's funny that, just as a side note, that a lot of parents' most embarrassing moment is when they bring their 2 or 3-year-olds into grocery stores and the kid has a fit because they were told they couldn't have 18 chocolate bars when they walked through at the cashier, and they're lying and stomping their feet, lying on the ground, and they're looking around, saying, the parents are looking around going, oh my goodness, I just want to die. I just want to get out of here and pick this kid up off the floor, put it in the car, and go home. And meanwhile, you have these people without masks coming in and saying, I'm sorry, but we're protecting the store against COVID. You're going to have to go out and get a mask and come back in. And these adults are basically lying on the floor, stomping their feet, yelling, and having a fit like a 2-year-old would. And they don't find that embarrassing.
No, not at all, because it's all about me and what I want and my freedoms, America. So yeah, that's part of it. So getting back to the whole schools reopening, because it was normalization, trying to get us back to normalization. So one of the arguments that was forwarded by propagandist media was And you know who else did this? The Pediatric Society started this one, that it is more detrimental for a child to stay at home for lack of socialization than there is risk of them getting COVID. That was the Pediatric Society wrote that. And my jaw about hit the floor when I saw it, because no, risking your child's health for a play date and for socialization is, these things are not equal in any way, shape, or form. Like, I'm a parent. I recognize that socializing with my child could sometimes just be me. Or if your kid's young enough, it's your child, and Mr. Fluffy having a cup of tea and socializing that way. It can come from so many different ways. I think part of it is this need that, number one, a very real need, that parents need to get back to work and they have no other choice. The other is, I don't want to be bothered with my kid. I don't like the idea of having to be a parent 24/7. I'm just not equipped to deal with it.
Well, I've never had to do it, right? Like, I mean, you have no paid leave when, maternity or paternity leave in the United States. So there's no time really to bond with your children, because they're going into a sitter's house, or somebody is coming to your home, because you are forced to go back to work almost instantly after childbirth. And so there was never that bonding time that you have with your kids, right? So your kids will, occasionally wonder who's that person coming through the door, right? That has the same last name as me and sometimes gives me money.
Well, that's exactly right. And Rebecca just brought up a good point here. She says, what do you think the no mask people are teaching their own kids who will be heading back to school with your kid? So let's take a look at that. This is from Indiana. Indiana, notorious red state, to the point where I'm very familiar with Indiana. So I always feel bad when I'm driving through Indiana, because every radio station from FM to AM, including their TV and their newspapers, has one side, and it's always the far right side. Indiana still has sundown towns. Outside of Indianapolis, which literally means city of Indiana, because there really isn't another one, that's all you see. So all of these people, the majority, were no maskers. And every time my husband went down in the last few months, he would wear a mask to the gas station, grocery store, whatever, and he'd be the only one there. So here's what happened in Indiana, because they were so eager to reopen their schools. And we have reports now from this particular high school. School reopens and the coronavirus creeps in. So they lasted all of 1 day. 1 day in the entire district had to shut down. And part of it was, it says, just hours into the first day of classes on Thursday, a call from the county health department notified Greenfield Central Junior High School in Indiana that a student had walked the halls and sat in various classrooms had tested positive for the coronavirus. So here's something I want you to understand. We put up the first article from WebMD, who talked about Georgia, this summer camp, thought they were taking the right precautions, and they were limiting lunch and socialization and dorm rooms to 15 kids. And that was it. There was our maximum. So now here we have a junior high where there are way more than 15 kids in a class and a lunchroom. And even in my own school in Illinois, they thought that limiting lunch to 50 kids was going to be safe. But we now have empirical evidence from Georgia and all of these others that no, it's not going to work. And this is a junior high. So you went from a summer camp with the younger kids now to a junior high. And here again, all of these students were supposed to have testing done before they were admitted back into the schools. Well, parents being resourceful, and a test here in the United States, people are getting bills for $2,000. Who can afford that, especially if you have more than one kid? So they are buying false test results and providing those to the schools. So some of these kids aren't even getting tested. And I don't know that I fault the parents, because If you have 2 kids, that's 4 or 5 grand just to get your kid back to school. So here and again, it goes back to the money issue. So that was Indiana. And I got to tell you, I have a friend who's a doctor and has a number of obviously cohorts in Indiana, and this is in Indianapolis. One of the doctors who treats geriatric and another one who treats pediatricians, they're being told not to report COVID tests. They're being told that if somebody has symptoms, just send them home. Don't mention COVID. Don't put it on your documentation. Don't put it on your reports.
But
So,
why, Karen? Why would that be?
because we don't want to admit that we're wrong on these things, and that's where it comes from.
It's insane. It's insane that you know, that you're willing to sacrifice the population.
Well, I think we always have been. It's just undeniable now. And that's kind of where we're at. Like and this is where I push back on the Biden folks, because they will say, well, we got to get him out of here, got to get him out of here, and they'll point to 150,000 COVID deaths, and I'm like, yeah, absolutely, that's wrong. But where were you when 45,000 died last year, and the year before, and the year before that, and the year before that, plus the number of medical bankruptcies for our seniors? Where were you? Because here's what we're still seeing, the news coming out of the DNC and their committees saying, no, we don't want to have anything to do with Medicare for all. We don't want to have anything to do with a policy that will not only save lives but save money, because we have lobbyists right here in our DNC committee who are uncomfortable with that, and we're uncomfortable making our donor class uncomfortable. So it all goes back to the money, all of it.
Well, of course it is, right? I mean, the decisions are made based on the people that have the power to do that, right? Which is basically white upper class people. They have the negotiation stance that allows them to think. And the problem is with this class is that coronavirus doesn't care how much money you have.
No, and we saw that last week with Herman Cain. Herman Cain was worth millions. His estate now will have to deal with his millions of dollars. He just passed away. And he spent weeks in ICU, so his estate will have to pay about $100,000 to $200,000 in medical expenses, which they can. But what about the rest of us who grandma passes away, auntie passes away, or God forbid, one of your children? Now you get the funeral expenses plus the testing plus all the medical expenses, and we've already covered the cost. If you needed care and recovered, and you were not necessarily in ICU but admitted to the hospital, you were looking at, with insurance, $38,000 in expense. If you didn't have insurance, it was upwards of $78,000. So all of this in the context of DNC members who voted no. There were over 100 of them who voted no on including Medicare for all just on the platform, not saying that they support it, but just allowing it to even be mentioned on the DNC platform. What does that say about morality?
On top of everything else, right? The unemployment extension of $600 weekly is just a lapse.
Yeah.
Right? And so what did the Senate do? They went on break. Right? To at least keep people having the ability to feed their families. Let's just, even if you just agree to continue this for a month, just to give yourself a little more headspace. No, we're not going to come to an agreement because of playing politics back and forth, tribalized politics back and forth, and then we're going to go away. And then we find out that the Democrats and Republicans have finally come to an agreement, and that is based on banning TikTok.
And that's exactly what it is. So I do have a piece on the TikTok thing, because last week we also included antitrust in some of our conversations because you had the hearing in the Judiciary Committee in the House for antitrust, and they trotted out all the social media pieces. So it was Jeff Bezos, as well as Facebook and Twitter, and all of their representatives were out there talking about how they are actually participating in violating antitrust laws, and everybody on the committee went, yeah, and nothing happened. So then TikTok, this whole meltdown with Trump and TikTok, this morning, overnight, the news came out that Trump called Microsoft, Mr. Cook, who was at the antitrust hearing, and asked them to purchase TikTok for the United States. So they are actually looking at doing that. I'm gonna see if I have. No, I don't have that on here. But it's a new headline that came out that maybe Microsoft is going to be purchasing it. And the only social network that I'm aware of that Microsoft actually owns is LinkedIn. I don't think they have anything else. If I'm wrong on that, somebody correct me. But so don't you worry, Andy. Trump is going to take care of that. Trump and Tom Cook are going to take care of that whole TikTok issue that I know kept you up last night.
That's right. That's killing people.
Right.
Mhm.
Exactly. So,
Thank goodness.
so I want to do a real quick look back. And this is an article from Philip Bump, unfortunate last name, from March 25th. And he was part of the Washington Post. He's more of a right-leaning pundit. I know journalists aren't supposed to be, but that's bullshit. They are. They're people. So they trotted him out from the Washington Post to talk about how the dynamics of the spread of COVID in the United States and the response to the pandemic has varied based on politics. Democrats consistently report more concern about the virus and more shifts in their behavior meant to limit its spread. Republicans are more likely to share President Trump's view on the scope and the pandemic will be limited. The reason why I pulled this out as a look back was because we had all of these pundits talking about the disparities in states, the politicization of the global pandemic on red state, blue state. And even this is kind of an elementary look at it because there are Republicans in New York. I've talked to them. I know that they're there. Illinois is considered a blue state, but the reason it's blue is because of Cook County around Chicago. The entire rest of the state is majority Republican. Some, like in my county, by a very narrow margin. Others, by a wide swath, they're Republicans. So this whole idea that one state is an autonomous group of one single political view is ridiculous. So here we had Philip, who was kind of excusing the differences between red state, blue state, and how they went through things. And if you go back and read his article, he does put some blame on Trump for some of the red states. Okay, so here's what transpired over the weekend and part of last week. So the memos were leaked about Jared Kushner, who was appointed by Trump to lead the pandemic issue, and there was an actual decision made when the virus started hitting New York and Chicago and California. Well, those are blue states, and if those people get sick, we're just really not going to help them. So you can see clearly the supplies that were requested. You remember, Andy, when Trump was saying, no, I don't like that governor. She hurt my feelings. And you're going to come apologize and bend the knee to me. And it was very much a political thing. But what we found in this memo is it went a little bit further than that. They were actually counting on people getting sick and dying in these states, and they were totally okay with that.
Well, sure, that's been a narrative that's been disproportionately not talked about since the pandemic started, right? Like, I mean, everybody was up in arms about all of this and how horrible it is, and we've got to do our best to save humanity. And then they realized how much more it was affecting Black and brown people, so then it wasn't as popular.
Yeah,
Right?
and I recall we were first with this story back in beginning of March, and we had Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, the former senior vice president of the EPA. I want to make sure I get that right. Who's talking about social justice communities, environmental factors having a huge effect on COVID response rates. So, yeah, we
And
know about it.
another prime example of environmental racism, right? We talked about over and over again.
Right. So now here we have validation of everything that we had said. Validation that yes, they actually made a conscious decision that if you are a Republican who happen to live in a blue state like California or Illinois or New York, New Jersey, any of those states, you were going to be sacrificed by your own political
Thank you
party.
for your service. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. There's your American service, patriotism, yeah, whatever. So here you actually have not only this disparity in looking at people as people from an administrative level, but criminal negligence in the way that they handled this. So it goes beyond just moral depravity into a legal issue. And I think people really aren't getting that because even we're still seeing these MAGA people, and I get it, do your thing, but you cannot say that you're a patriot when you have somebody literally making a choice that your counterpart in another area should die because of a
And we've seen
re-election.
that. We've seen that for the last 5 years. That's basically Trump's only play, right? Every good president, bad president, however you think your favorite guy in office has performed, on your team member or whatever, has done a good job or a bad job over when they were president, right? It's all about your team and how your narrative goes. And Trump's been always just playing to his base, where other presidents have tried to bridge those gaps, right? Tried to say, okay, well, I have my, political base on one side. I'm going to try to at least do things that make life good or pseudo better in society for everyone, not just my base, right? Where Trump basically has taken his base, he knows the people don't stick with him through thick and thin, and said, okay, well, there's your enemy. We're not including them. We're just going to tell you that there's the enemy. So why would anybody think that his response to the pandemic to deal with states that are considered blue would, of course, be the enemy, right? So let's use the pandemic to our advantage. If we can kill off the other side, then the percentage of people that are in my camp goes up, right?
Right, and I'm going to push back on that a little bit because we're assuming that Trump's base are average people who work for a living, and I would say that they're not. And let me tell you why. I believe, it is my belief, and I think that the headlines keep bearing this out. The reason why, if you recall, we were supposed to sacrifice our grandparents for the economy and they were going to go out shopping because they're patriots. And now we have to sacrifice our children and our families because we need to restart the economy. And so I've been watching this for a while. And I put up a chart here. This is the cost of oil per barrel, and these are speculative. It's a speculative market, so it's forward looking on. I'm going to bet on what the price of oil will be in the future period. So what I thought was interesting about this, I've been looking at this for a while, and in July when the price of oil hit, what was it, like $10, $12 a barrel, which was next to nothing. And then we see it dip back again at the end of July. And now here it is, July 26th, 28th, where it was down again. And the reason why this is an important measure, Andy, what requires oil?
The military.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you have that volatility in oil prices, you have a major problem with your economy, especially here in the United States where we have, believe that number is still 35 states, 35 out of 50 states have an economy that relies on the military. This is they build the widgets to make tanks and jets, or they build the jets themselves, or they have as their major employer next to Walmart a defense contractor company. So there are 35 states, like Iowa is tanks. Alabama is jets for Boeing and Lockheed. So when that price of oil drops, you are about to have 35 states in this country who uh, will actually absolutely collapse. And that's the problem that we have. So when we talk about, as progressives, cutting the military budget, you really need to be careful about what you're doing, because if you're talking about cutting the military budget in any form, you've got to have something like the federal jobs guarantee to help average people. Otherwise, the moms and dads that work at Lockheed or other defense contractors or military projects, what are you going to do with them?
That's it, right? We talk about with any progressive policy, there's always has to be talked about a just transition. And there are people that, no fault of their own, that live in a neoliberal economy where unemployment is a choice by a political choice by your government, right? That if you're going to employ people and do it properly and introduce a Green New Deal and Medicare for all, the unfortunate part of that is that anybody in those industries, like the medical professionals and the insurance companies and the fossil fuel industry, all of those people are going to be thrown out by any of those corporations because they don't give a shit about their workers anyway. So the federal jobs guarantee will at least, guarantee a job for all of those people to transition back into the private sector or to stay in a jobs guarantee scenario, right? Mm-hmm. That's why the two have to go before you can consider anything. And that's why we always push back on the UBI folks that prefer a UBI to a jobs guarantee, because the UBI does nothing. Right? The UBI basically sets up two different classes of people that don't work and live on poverty wages with the UBI, or they work and they get the UBI, so they're a little bit better off. But now they're the only ones that are responsible for driving the economy and creating all the goods and services for everybody when you need that the most, right? So, so that's why the jobs guarantee is so vital to all of these policies that we talk about as progressives.
Absolutely. And I think for those who are like one of our viewers is like, subjects changing too rapidly. I'm like, no, this all goes together. The reason we're having these discussions with COVID and reopening schools and reopening the economy is because it's all about the money. So we're going to demonstrate that here a little bit. GDP numbers came out for the US. And oh boy, did they make a splash, because for the first time in history, we had the largest decline in a quarter ever. It was like 32% drop. That's huge. And why was that? Because we had a shutdown. So here is the ultimate pushback on that trickle-down economics, right? GDP, for those who are not familiar, is a monetary measure of the market value of all the goods and services produced in a specific time period. So for the second quarter, this is the productivity and work that Americans put forward to create the value in our country. American workers, not job creators, workers. Right? So when you had everybody staying at home because of COVID, what happened? It fell, and it fell at 32%, and that freaked people the hell out. But I think, again, it tears down this trickle down economic notion, And it also proves the value of the American citizen, not just the worker, but the citizen, because we had our frontline workers who were doing things out into the public, and then we had the people who are not necessarily paid by someone else doing productive, necessary work at home in the domestic area. So all of these things were happening, which is, to Andy's point, federal jobs guarantee actually looks at work differently. So if you had to stay home with your child, that is work. We recognize that as work. Whereas today we
Yes.
don't.
Exactly. We over the neoliberal regime since Reagan, we've allowed capital, which are the corporations and the people that run them, to define what work is, right? And capital is by nature driven by profit. So if there are things to do in society that are not profitable, capital wants nothing to do with it. And if your government isn't properly funding the economy to get things done that are not profitable, then that's why you have a breakdown in systems. That's why infrastructure is so horrible in the United States, because it's not a profitable venture, right? That's why education is in a state it's in. That's why healthcare is in the state it's in. Because the only way you're going to get the private sector to properly run it is if it's profitable, and it's not. And that's where your government, who has backstopped the market this entire time without a worry about how much they're spending. The only time they worry about how much they're spending is if the money is going directly to you. Then it's free stuff, and it's going to bankrupt the country. We can give trillions of dollars to the Fed to back the market, which is totally different than society, but we can't give people $600 a week to survive and drive GDP, which is what we're looking at, right? Because of the way that society is underfunded by the government.
Well, to your point, Andy, last week we saw the train and the bridge collapse in Arizona. Where was the private capitalist to fix that bridge so that the train with the goods and services or the supplies could make it to its destination? They weren't there. You cannot donate to save a bridge. That has to be done at a municipal level. When we're cutting funding for those things, you disrupt those supply chains. So obviously there's something wrong in this whole narrative. And I just want to put up two different arguments here, one from Forbes and one from Wall Street, where the two of these folks are not in agreement with each other about those GDP numbers. So what was interesting here on the one side, you've got the Wall Street Journal talks about the contraction at a record rate. So this is Wall Street going, holy shit, what happened? Let's look at the Commerce Department's initial estimates and unemployment numbers. So Wall Street is starting to panic. They're like, okay, this is super bad. We knew this was coming. You knew that the inflation adjusted rate of 32.9% was just rock bottom. So Wall Street Journal is freaking out. But then here comes Forbes. And Forbes says, no. You have to look at it in terms of, if you get a $500 bonus in July, that doesn't mean you carry that out every month to the end of the year for an annualized look. And so Forbes is trying to push back on this GDP not being so bad. And the Q3 and Q4 will be better than Q2. Well, what Forbes is arguing is that your kid is going to go back to school, you're going to go back to school, and everything's normal. We spent the last 45 minutes discussing how that is completely wrong, it's false, and if we continue on that particular narrative, more people will die. But here you have two financial publications who are putting out information that is confusing the public, and it is my belief that they're doing it on purpose. But Forbes, isn't that the one that's owned by Mike Bloomberg?
I'm not sure.
Okay, well, I believe.
But regardless, it doesn't matter who owns it. It's still a neoliberal rag. right?
Mm.
And they're trying to. It's funny because it's like someone that gets caught in a lie and a little bit more of the lie is exposed. And so they're trying to change the lie slightly to make it more palatable. And then, it's like lying to your spouse about something. And then you have to remember what you said, what your lie was in the first place. And find, the house of cards is starting to tumble down to the ground. And it's actually kind of ludicrous why they say the things they do when the reality is all you have to do is open your eyes and look and see what they've done to keep rich people's investments,
Right.
in the black over the last 4 or 5 months, which if their narrative was true about how unfunded capitalism actually and the macroeconomy works, then that would have been everybody portfolio would have been in the shitter completely by now, right? So it's if you have the ability to see that this is a lie and to see the truth and all of the things that you've been telling me, I can now look at what's happening and see that that is a lie, right? It's they're so bought in. It's taken them so long to get to this point in history that they couldn't possibly change and save face in it.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely. And this is where I want to point out to the cavalry came riding in. And for those of you who are not following these world-class economists, you need to be following them because they Okay, so I was talking to Andy about this, and I want to put it up here. This is a tweet thread that started by Fadl Kaboub, and you can see all of these other economists jump in, and the subject they're talking about is the interest rate. Because part of the problem that Annie's talking about, these neocon and neoliberal economists have no explanation for the relationship of the interest rate to the economy as a whole. They have no theory, no principle, the way that Fadel and his school of thought in macroeconomics have not only controls but can predict how these things work. So this is where I think it's hilarious to me. Okay, we always had that narrative about we need to stop idolizing sports figures and celebrities and really put the emphasis on our teachers and like Ruth Bader Ginsburg and all of these people who are actual heroes. These people are the same, these economists. So I really want to put this up here. And if you get a chance, I'll put it in the thread here so you can go out and read it. First of all, it's hilariously snarky, and I love it. I am living for it. But then it's so accurate, and you can really learn a lot by following these people. So you have this really nice example, and Dr. Kaboub is trying to be so nice in the way he explains it, pragmatic, include all of these articles and definitions. And then, of course, you get somebody, whoever this Dario person is, who's like, no, it's not. You suck. Just the worst take on a pushback ever. And here comes Scott Fulwiler. And this is the part where I actually snorted my coffee this morning because Scott's not even trying to pretend anymore. He's like, he goes full on dunk on this guy to the point where it is probably the snarkiest, funniest thing I have seen in a long time. So shout out to Dr. Fulwiler on that one. And also Dr. Kaboub, because they just explained it so eloquently. How this works from a macroeconomic framework that we can all understand and start to ignore and diminish these neocon neoliberal voices who haven't got a fucking clue how this stuff actually works. So kudos to you guys for
it's
being
like they decided that okay, being nice isn't working. Who in our group is the snarkiest that we can elect to be the MMT troll in our group?
Scott. Scott.
Ta-da.
Yep. Yep.
Sure,
Exactly.
MMT's a lot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And he's so funny because I had the opportunity to meet him, and he's very reserved, very kind of stoic. But boy, hand him some Twitter, and he's all in for yes, Queen. I love it. Keep doing it. Good on you, Scott. And so now I need a meme like a rap battle album cover with Rohan Gray and Fidel and Scott and Nathan Tankus dropping the sickest album of 2020. So if somebody could do that for me, I would love it. That would be just great. So, but if you're not already following these folks, please follow them. And just real quick, Rebecca says it's very hard to hear Andy. We know. Andy's in the middle of doing a really good thing for somebody, so he doesn't have his A grade game together.
Yeah, my normal audio equipment is set up. What is still set up at a place that I loaned it to my for them to use for playing music at a wedding reception, and it was supposed to make it home yesterday, but the Wizard of Oz type weather that was on and off again yesterday kind of made it impossible for me to want to carry that stuff, in the rainstorm and the windstorm. So it's going to be here. Will it be back in time for Wednesday?
Oh, that's good. That's good to know. Everybody should tune in Wednesday when you can actually hear Andy. That'll be great.
I might actually have something to say.
Yeah, there's that. So that was kind of the wrap up that I wanted to cover today, because the basis of all decisions, particularly in Washington or when you're dealing with lobbyists, whatever, it's always money. Follow the money in all of these things. This is why we had over 100 DNC members decide not to even mention Medicare for All on the platform. This is why our economy is in the shitter, because we have had people who don't understand or don't understand basic humanity and how macroeconomics works, and why the decisions they're making have precipitated this economic collapse. And then all of it from now hydrochloric, whatever it is.
Hydroxychloroquine.
Thank you. That is making a resurgence in the headlines, because let's not forget, Trump and Jared and a bunch of people heavily invested in that at the beginning. So now they're trying to hawk that again because they're going to lose money. So please don't buy into that sort of thing, especially this new sex demon doctor that they trotted out. All of that is designed for you to buy and transfer your wealth to them. Stop and think about it, because obviously they don't care about you, they don't care about your family, they don't care about your neighbors, your community, none of it. It's all but a dollar sign to them, and you need to be aware of it to protect yourself and your family. And I don't care if you consider yourself a conservative. I don't care if you and I disagree on 9 out of 10 top issues. I need you not to die. And so please, please stop listening to these people.
Yes.
Or at least, like we always say here, critical thinking. If you think I'm wrong, tell me how, and we can work through that. And Rebecca brings up a good point. It didn't help Herman Cain. So, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So that was the end of my particular rant. Andy, we need to get Scott and Fidel on the show, because they're just so delightfully snarky now.
We could have a wrap off.
Yes, yes. or like a roast. Just have them do a roast. Milton Freeman. What about fake Milton Freeman? They could do the Econ roast.
Still alive?
I don't know. Oh, excellent. Excellent. So, yeah, that's all I got here. But stay tuned for Wednesday. We'll be back here Wednesday. And then if you notice at the bottom of the screen here, we put our Patreon. And the reason why we put that up there is corporate media has the narrative that they do because they are paid by corporations and advertising dollars. So I would always point to the 2016 comprehensive study by the Journal of American Medicine, who showed that $270 billion, billion with a B, was spent by pharma and insurance companies at corporate media. This is CNN, NBC, CBS, all of these, including Fox. And their sole goal was to diminish reporting and perception on Medicare for all. So $270 billion is being used to sway corporate media. What we rely on here, a tip. If you like the programming that you hear here, if you like the showcasing that we're doing of Rome's Rebellion or Rome Bethia, DLF, the entire crew here with their interviews and content and things like that, you would be shocked how far $1 goes. So you can either sign up for a monthly subscription, or there's a little bucket there where you can just drop $1. So if you enjoy the programming, you think it's good, and you want us to continue and grow and expand, then instead of us being financed by corporations, we're financed by you. There's a huge difference there. So consider it, and if you haven't done so already, please do. If you've done it, thank you. We appreciate it, and we are fully transparent with how we spend our money and what investments we make. So please consider that. Yes, working on our union affiliation. So I will be so happy when we get to have our own union bug and put it on the screen right there and point to it and explain to people why it is so important. So that's coming. All right. Well, for me, for Andy, and for the rest of the team, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you back here bright and early on Wednesday. Thank you.
The dog, we bout that A. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog, we keep it in G.